Let's say you wanted to repeat these lines of code 3 times. Well, you may think the best way of doing this is to copy, paste, and paste. Well, what if I were to tell you that there's a better way of doing that? And that's with functions. And today I'm going to show you how to use them. So let's get started. Functions are lines of code that you can simply call by typing them out. So this right here is the name of a function, and if you want to call on it, you would simply type it by putting 2 brackets under its name. So let me show you how to do that in the code. So let's get rid of these 3 lines that we do not need, and we're simply going to copy these 3 lines and delete them as well. So now we're going to create our function. But don't forget, when you're deleting this, copy it before you delete it. Okay, so now let's define our first function. So to define a function, you say def, which is short for define, and then we're going to say my first function, and this is basically the name of our function, and then you add 2 brackets, and then after that you add a colon, enter, and then you'll just paste our old code. And you'll notice there'll be some indentation problems, so just go to the front, tab, and tab. So now if you want to call onto these functions multiple times, all we have to do is say my first function brackets, and what you'll notice is we're calling this, and when we define a function, nothing inside the function actually takes place before you call it. So this will only happen one time, and if you want to call it multiple times, we just do this and this. So we call this 3 times. Let's run this module, and we'll notice that we say hi 1 time, 1 time, 1 time. One thing you may also notice is this says repeated number equals 0, repeat the number plus 1. And what's basically happening here is we're only repeating the number inside the function. So this repeated number, each function has its own repeated number variable, so they're all unique to each other, so it's not a variable that all the functions share. So if we wanted to do that, we're going to use what we call global variables. So we'll delete this, or copy, then delete, and then say enter, enter, and paste. So after that, we're not able to use a global variable in a function unless we define it as a global variable. So in order to do that, we say global and then give it the name, and don't assign it a value here, just say repeat number, and that allows us to use this variable inside a function. So now let's run the module, and you'll notice, boom, it will say hi 1 time, 2 time, and 3 times, because it's not using the variable inside each specific function, but it's using the global variable that affects every single function. We can also use variables in our functions. These are called arguments, and these variables go in between the 2 brackets in our function when we're calling it. And these arguments basically will decide how the function is processed, and it will also decide what the function outputs. So let me show you how to create some arguments. So now let's get rid of this code, and we're going to create an argument, or not an argument, but a function that involves arguments. So let's first define some variables. What we're going to do is, we're going to have the user input 2 numbers, and then we're simply going to add it. So let's create the first number, which is int 1. And we're going to use a built-in Python function, which is called input, and then just cover it in brackets, and then say int 2, and assign that as input as well. So now we're going to create our function, which is called add numbers. And in order to create these arguments, you need to name them, names that are not similar to any variables outside the function. So here we have num1 comma num2. Now these are going to be the arguments which are going to input into our function whenever we call it. So now let's add the colon, and we're going to say return, and this basically will give out a value whenever we run this function. So we'll say return num1 plus num2. But the problem with doing this is if we say 4 plus 9, if we input 4 and 9, we're going to get the answer 49, not 13. This is because this input creates strings. It gets a string, so we need to convert this two numbers into integers. And in order to do that, we'll use another Python function called int. So we'll say int, convert this into an integer, and then we'll say int and convert this into an integer as well. Okay, next we're going to call this function by saying add numbers, and then use the parameter int1 comma int2. And now we have to print this value because we're returning a value with this return line of code. And now we're just going to run the module, save, and you'll notice we get we have to input values. So let's input 3, enter, 6, enter, and we get the value 9. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and smash the subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you don't miss the next video. We're going to be going over classes and objects, so stay tuned for that. Peace.